and that can get really fun, right? I have done markups on the document so that I make sure that I cover most of the important parts of it. But this is for you to ask any questions about the solicitation that you have noticed. A few days after the presentation, you will be receiving an email with a copy of the PowerPoint slides. Oh, there are no slides for this. So with a copy of the solicitation marked up as you see it today, you'll receive a copy of the recording and any other resources that we discussed today during our training. And I actually see that we have a pretty small group. So if we could go around and just say our names, our organization and our pronouns and where we're located, that would be great. As I mentioned earlier, I'm with Caminar Latino and I live in North Carolina. So it is cloudy and kind of cold, not an awesome day. And I'll pass it on to Izzy.
Hi, my name is Izzy Medina. I am the new senior training, TA and training coordinator for Caminar Latino. My pronouns are she and her, and I am in sunny South Florida.
Thank you, Izzy. Ian?
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Sheehan Neathold. I'm with Caminar Latino, Latinos United for Peace and Equity. I am a senior project specialist. I think I have talked or emailed most of you, so it's nice to see you all. Well, I can't really see you, but it's nice to see you kind of. And I have been here for about 3 years. So welcome.
And Sheehan's in Nevada.
Oh, yes. Snowy, but sunny Nevada.
Yes. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Machida, and I'm here on behalf of Nisswa Association Incorporated, and I'm help them with their grants, and I'm she, her, and yeah, that's it.
And you're in California, is that right?
Oh, yes, Pasadena, but and Nisswa is actually in South Bay, Los Angeles area.
Thank you, Linda. Erica, it's like you knew I was gonna call you next.
No, I just happened to park right on time. I am Erica Moria. I'm the executive director and founder of Supreme Transitions here in Detroit, Michigan, where our weather is very much like yours today at this moment in Michigan.
Thank you, Erica. Serena?
Yes, hello, my name is Serena Johnson. I'm also in Detroit, Michigan. I am here on behalf of and with Supreme Transitions with Erica over there. We're in different cars, but we're both parked. It is nice to see everyone here.
Thank you, Serena. I hope I said your name correctly, Anarelli?
Yes. Hi, my name is Marilyn, and we are in California, and the company is Sugar Plain Center.
She, her.
Yes.
And Ian.
And what's your name?
Rogelio Gomez. I'm the accountant for the organization here.
Nice to meet you, Rogelio. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Stephanie? Not sure if you're trying to speak, Stephanie, but if you are, you're on mute. Okay, and I'll go to Daniel.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I've been having issues with my audio. My name is Daniel Mercado. I am from New York City, the neighborhood Washington Heights specifically. I am from a nonprofit, Community League of the Heights. I'm the director of their technology and workforce program.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
We have another Daniel.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name's Daniel, pronouns he, him, and I'm here in Oregon. It's sunny today. And I'm the grants manager here at Centro Cultural, a nonprofit out in Washington County.
All right. Lang?
Hello, I am also in the
club of cars, and I am currently driving safely. My pronouns are she, her, and I am with Orange County Rape Crisis Center. I'm the associate director there, but I'm attending on behalf of AOCOS, Advocates of Color Offering Support. And it is gloomy and overcast in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Yeah. Thank you, Lang. Dolores?
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, I am Dolores, and I am she and her, and I'm with the Mighty Christ Church here in East St. Louis. I'm traveling right now, but I am very interested in what you are all going to present.
Thank you, Dolores. Stephanie, did you want to go?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Cassidy. I'm Ogawa Lakota, and I'm the acting assistant director here at Native American Lifelines in Baltimore, but we are located in both Baltimore and Boston.
Thank you, Stephanie. Rachel?
Hey there, I'm also, my name is Rachel Valentine, she, her pronouns, and I'm also calling in from Chapel Hill alongside Lang. Thanks for hosting this.
Thank you. And Elizabeth? Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you're trying to speak, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I just signed in. So, okay, I almost missed it too. Okay, I'm at work. So, my name is Elizabeth Santiago, and I'm from the Glen Community Crisis Center.
Nice to meet you. Oh, actually, we know each other. Hi. Now that I see your face. Yeah.
Okay.
It's good to have you. It's good to have you. Well, welcome everybody. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm hoping that this is going to be very interactive and that you stop me when you have questions. It is going to be very detailed, but you will get copies of everything at the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to be sharing my screen. Let me put the document I need to share here. And all right, can everybody see my screen? All right, so I ask that you actually like unmute yourself and speak when you need to ask a question, because I can see the little boxes, but they're very small. And so unless you raise your hand or make noise, I won't know that you're trying to say something. And if anything, Izzy, if you can give me a heads up if somebody is trying to write something in the chat or has a question that I miss, I'd appreciate that too. So I'm sharing with you all the PDF form of the 2023 OVW CSSP application. As you can see, the way we'll go through this is we'll go through the highlighted sections, and I have made notes in red of things for you to remember and keep in mind. Izzy will also be sharing on the chat several, and I mean several links for you to click on or keep if it's something that we're talking about that you can access directly. So I think the first thing to note is the deadlines. Whenever you're writing a federal grant, you want to first look at the first page and see what the deadlines are that are listed. The first thing that's going to be due is the letter of intent, which is due in 18 days, March 20th. And when you draft it, you can send the email attachment to the email address that I wrote here, which is ovw.cultural@usdoj.gov. There is a sample letter of intent that you can use. It is a very short 2-paragraph letter, so it doesn't have to be anything very fancy. And the sample that OVW provides you with is very specific as to what needs to be included, which is certifying that you have an active SAM ID and that you have a unique entity identifier, and that you will be, you're intending to apply for this solicitation. The next important deadline is April 12th, and that is the grants.gov deadline. This means that you need to be in the grants.gov website, already have completed all the forms required by grants.gov, no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And it's important to know that it's Eastern time, because I know that there's a lot of folks in this call that are from different time zones. So that means for some people that it may be 9:59, right? If you're in Pacific time. And then the last deadline is the Just Grants deadline, and that's where you will submit your full application. And that deadline is April 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern. So I highlighted that as well because it's not 11:59, it's 9 p.m. Now, one of the best practices that I tell people when writing one of these grants is those deadlines are fine and dandy, but those are not your deadlines. Your deadlines should be 3 to 5 days before the listed deadline here. And the reason for that is because you don't want to be caught in some sort of weather event that happens on the day that the deadline is, and then you can't submit because, I don't know, there was a tornado or something awful, or the website crashed because so many people are trying to apply for it that it couldn't do the work that it needed to do that day to sustain the amount of traffic that it was getting. You also want to give yourself that time in case while you are submitting and uploading forms, there are any hiccups in any of the systems. As most of you probably already know, because I've worked with you, there's a lot of issues sometimes managing and navigating all these federal websites. So make sure that your personal deadline is 3 to 5 days ahead of that. And that, you know, if there are any technical issues that come up when you're trying to submit, that you go ahead and you contact the help desk, that you create a ticket, and that you create some sort of paper trail as to when you contacted the help desk, who you spoke to, and what your ticket number was, because you want to keep yourself covered. Okay, any questions so far? All right. So the next thing you want to do is clearly you want to make sure that your organization is going to be eligible for this funding. What is interesting about CSSP funding that is different from other OVW solicitations is that this is the only OVW solicitation that I believe does not have a requirement for you to have a 501c3. This means that if you are simply registered as a nonprofit in the state that you are doing business, you are eligible to apply. And I believe all the organizations here meet this eligibility criteria. One thing I did forget to mention is that the letter of intent that is due March 20th is not mandatory. It's only encouraged, but it's a good practice to put that letter forward. And then another opportunity for you to ask questions directly to the OVW program manager is during the pre-application information sessions. And there will be 2 this year, and I think it's further down. But in order to register, you need to email them right here. So you would just send an email and say that you are writing to register for the OVW CSSP pre-application session, and you will tell them the date and the time that you would like to register for. And I think it's further down, but if I'm correct, I think it's March 14th and 15th this year, between I think 2 and 4:30 p.m., something like that. So in your email, be very specific as to which session you're asking to enroll for. So the fun stuff is always the government grant systems. And the first government grant system that you're going to want to have checked off your list before you start this application is your SAM ID. You need to make sure that your SAM ID is updated and active. This typically means that you have to log into SAM at least twice a year to make sure that your password works, that everything is, you know, green on that screen saying that you're active. Also through SAM, you obtain what's called the unique entity identifier. If you've been in the nonprofit world for a long time, you'll remember there used to be a DUNS number requirement. That is no longer the case as of 2021. They moved away from the DUNS number and now issue you a unique entity identifier through SAM. So make sure if you haven't logged into SAM that you do and that you are still active. Then the next step is going into grants.gov, right? Saying that you're going to be applying for this application and filling out the administrative documentation required from grants.gov. I think what's important to remember here is that you can't go to do what you need to do in Just Grants until you do what you need to do in grants.gov. And the two most important things in grants.gov that you need to fill out are the SF-424 and the SF-LLL. And those are two administrative forms that relate to you. One of them is about lobbying, saying that you're not going to be engaging in any lobbying activities. And the other one is also, it's a financial form. So once you submit those two forms, then you will be able to continue your process in Just Grants. So that's why the deadlines at the very beginning of the solicitation are different, because you need to make sure that you meet the grants.gov website deadline in order for you to be able to submit your full application in Just Grants. And I know that these systems can be very daunting and very difficult to navigate. And so that's one of the things that we are here to help you through. And, you know, we're happy to help you. Send us an email and we'll try to walk you through whatever we can. A lot of times we have to send you to the help desk directly because we want to make sure that you create that track record of any tech difficulties that you may have encountered. There are several links here that you can access support from if you're experiencing technical difficulties with any of the systems as well.
Gheisha, I have a question for you about the lobbying disclosure.
Yep.
So I just went in to try to complete the lobbying disclosure a couple days ago, and it's different from ones that we've had to do in the past where you basically say like, no, we don't do lobbying. So, you know, this one actually like didn't give us an option to say no. It just, we had to fill in a lot of information about like who's doing the lobbying and who's the one providing the service. And I was just curious if you know of any guidance on that, because the guidance on grants or on grants.gov is not helpful.
No, it's awful. And I'm happy to help you or Lan go through it, Rachel. If you want, what we can do and what I've done with other people is that we'll hop on a Zoom and we'll share screens and we'll walk you through whatever the issue may be. If it's just one of those forms that it's asking, like, you may be able to put NA. So it really depends on what the issue with the question is. I think a one-on-one may be a better approach to that.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. So as I mentioned, your full application actually goes onto the Just Grants website. And then the notification period anticipated for this solicitation is October 1st. So typically all OVW grants fiscal years are from October 1st through September 30th. I put a note here that says actual funding period may vary. And the reason I put this up is because you may be notified that you've been awarded. But if you don't turn around the documents that you need to turn around in time, your actual project start date may not be October 1st. And that's important because that means that you cannot begin expending funds October 1st, right? You will have to wait until you're actually awarded or your project actually begins before you can spend funds. Because if you were, let's say that they don't actually release your funds or award you until October 17th, and you started charging or started your project October 1st, you will not be reimbursed for that period of time. So that's important to keep in mind. It also means, you know, that although the application is due in April, it'll take 6 months or about 5 months for you to hear back from them as to whether you'll actually be funded. Okay, so this is just fun. You know, I always love a clickable table of contents because that means you don't have to be scrolling and get nauseous while you scroll finding things. So you can click on whatever topic and I'll take you straight to that page. In this part, they just talk about the Department of Justice and how the Violence Against Women Act is funded and how that funds this program in particular. And then here they talk about what the purpose of this funding is for, right? So it's to support community-based programming in providing culturally specific services to survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, dating violence, and stalking. And then we'll keep on going down. So I thought this was really cool. Actually, this was something that was not allowed before, but as many of you probably know, VAWA was reauthorized last year. And as part of that reauthorization process, they are allowing 10% of money used in this project under this solicitation that you can use towards legal services. That's something that you couldn't do before. Now, keep in mind that, you know, this is a $400,000 or $450,000, depending on what you're applying for, grant that is for 3 years. So we are talking about $10,000 a year that you could probably set aside for legal services. So, you know, what does that look like and what could you afford? It's going to depend. And also, if you do decide to do legal services, you will have to complete an extra form, which we'll talk about later in the solicitation. Then we go to the purpose areas, which are very important because your project needs to address at least one or more of the purpose areas. And that's important because if your project does not fit one of these purpose areas, it will likely not get funded. So you have to make sure that what you're proposing works with what their purpose areas are. So they have this year several purpose areas. I think it's priority areas that I want to highlight. Okay, so there's notes all over this document. Always read the notes. They make it a note, but it's actually like super important. So make sure you read it. If you are going to be addressing purpose area 6 or purpose area 8, you need to make sure that they're not being addressed in a silo, but that they are being addressed in conjunction with one of the other 8 purpose areas. If you only propose to address purpose area 6, you will probably not be funded. So make sure that if your purpose area is 6 or 8, you are also doing 2 or 3 or 4 or whichever one that you are going to focus your project on. And then priority areas are encouraged. I would say they're highly encouraged, and try to address them as well in your proposal. So a lot of the grant writing formula has to do with using a lot of their language and telling their language back to them, right? This definitely is a formula in the way that you follow the format and that you answer the questions and that you outline it, but there's also a format in the way that you reuse, right? Or recycle the language that they're using. So you're going to want to take language from their purpose areas and put it somewhere in your project, right? With purpose, of course. And the same thing you're going to want to do with the priority areas. So their purpose area, the priority areas this year is to advance racial equity, to strengthen efforts to prevent and end sexual assault. So I want to highlight this because a lot of organizations that we work with say that they do sexual assault.
And I'm like, you can't. I'm like, I don't want to put you through that.
I'm sorry, someone I think is unmuted. Okay, so I want to highlight this area because a lot of organizations that do domestic violence work feel like they can apply under that, and that's not necessarily true. You can apply or address priority area number 2 only if you are going to be working with survivors of sexual assault outside of the context of intimate partner violence, right? So that looks completely different than working with a domestic violence survivor who was also a victim of sexual violence by their intimate partner. So just keep that in mind. And then priority area number 3 is to improve outreach services in LGBTQ communities. What I will say about priority area 2 and priority area 3 is that if you focus on any of these 2, your project proposal budget can go up to $450,000 as opposed to $400,000. Now, keep in mind, it will also mean that there are other questions in the narrative piece that you will have to make sure that you address. So it's going to be a lot more writing in the narrative, and you'll still have the same 20-page limit. Questions about the priority areas and purpose areas, because that can be tricky sometimes. Okay. I always tell people, make sure that you read the solicitation companion guide. It's a really, it's a good resource if you have questions about any of the things that come up here in the solicitation. This is just a list of out of scope activities. So you cannot propose to do a research project. You also cannot use the money to address child abuse. If you are offering services to children, it has to be in the context that the child is a secondary victim of domestic violence and you're serving the child's parent or guardian as a primary victim. And then legal services, like we said earlier, yes, you can use some of this money for legal services, but it cannot be criminal defense. It can't be representation post-conviction. So it's very specific what you can and cannot do if you use the money for legal services. And again, it's only about $10,000 a year that you can set aside for that. Okay, so this year, OVW is anticipating that they will award 50 projects. This is about 9 more than last year. I think last year they funded 41. And this year, the maximum amount is $450,000. I put $100,000 per year because if you are not focusing on priority area 2, which is sexual assault, or priority area 3, which is the LGBTQ underserved community, you can only apply for $400,000 and not $450,000. So now keep in mind that is $400,000 throughout 3 years, right? So it would be like what, $133,000 every year. So your budget needs to reflect the 3 years of program activities. Any questions about that piece? Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, the funding levels is $400,000, but if you are going to be proposing a project where you're going to be spending more than 50% of your project services working with survivors of sexual assault or with LGBTQ communities, then it's $450,000. So they highlight that. There are some mandatory program requirements, which means you have to agree to this if you get funded. Part of that is that you will attend OVW training and technical assistance, and typically every grant has a set aside requirement for travel and training. Last year it was about $5,000. I'm not sure how much it is this year, but I'm sure we'll get there. And then you need to, collect and report on all your data. And that can be either quarterly or semi-annually, depending on the grant program. And then you have to be open for them to do a program assessment. So this looks like making sure that you have the internal capacity to take on this type of program. And it means that, keeping this in mind when you write your project and you set aside money in your budget, because administrative fees will be incurred by people who are managing the grant financially or working on program reporting or on any data that needs to be obtained to give to the federal government. So this is a section that talks broader on eligibility standards. And I've highlighted here the type of organizations that they say that are culturally specific that can apply.
Okay,
And then, yes.
Erica would like to know, can you read each one?
Yep, yes, I can. So the first example of a culturally specific program is a faith-based organization or a church that is providing culturally specific services focused on the needs of the Black community. The second one is a culturally specific English as a second language program focused on the needs of the Hispanic community. The third one is a culturally specific health center focused on the needs of the Native Hawaiian community. And the last one is a culturally specific program that provides services focused on DV, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. And so this note is important. So if the culturally specific program is one division within a larger organization with other areas of substantive work, the organization is not eligible because providing culturally specific services is not the primary purpose of the organization. And this is important because this means that if you are I'm going to call it a mainstream victim services provider, that happens to have a department that focuses on working with the Latino community, you are not eligible for this because you have that department, because you're considered a mainstream organization. However, a small domestic violence provider that focuses only on working with the Latina community that wants to partner with a mainstream organization to do this work can bring in a mainstream organization in that context, but the mainstream organization cannot be the lead applicant. So that's always really important to know. And then there are also further down, we'll discuss, there are some caps in what compensation can look like for partners, depending on whether they are culturally specific or a mainstream victim services provider. So this is also a list of eligibility requirements that the lead applicant needs to have. I would suggest going through this list as the first thing is make sure that you have some sort of board, right? And that the people in your board represent the participants that you are serving, and that you have demonstrated experience in serving victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the required partnerships. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the only OVW solicitation that does not require 501c3 status anymore. And then this part here talks about reasons why your application may be deemed ineligible. So if you propose any activities that are unallowable that we discussed before, out of scope, if your pre-award risk assessment, which we'll talk about shortly, doesn't address all the things that they need to see addressed, that could result in you being disqualified from obtaining OVW funding. This is also something that is different. So if you're used to state VOCA funds, typically those grants require a match. OVW does not. So this is something that is great because it means that culturally specific organizations that don't have any other money that they can provide as match can just apply for this and don't have to worry about cost sharing. So there is absolutely no match for this program. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do decide that you want to provide legal services as part of your program or project, you would have to complete the delivery of legal assistance certification. So that is a form that they have that you can probably, I think the link is here. So the sample certification letter can be found here. If you click on this link in the solicitation, you can access it. And you will basically be answering these 4 questions if you decide to provide legal services as part of your project. Required partnerships. So this is a piece where OVW is requiring culturally specific organizations to partner if they have less than 3 years of demonstrative experience providing services to victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, stalking, and dating violence. So the required partnerships and the MOU go hand in hand, because based on whether you're required to enter into a partnership or not, is what's going to determine if you're going to have to complete an MOU or memorandum of understanding, or an MOE or a memorandum of exemption. And so we have a tool that I think Izzy's placing in the chat that can help you figure out what category of applicant your organization is. I will say this. If the only way that you are able to submit an MOE or a memorandum of exemption is if you have been providing services to the victims of the 4 crimes for at least 3 years, and you can demonstrate that, and you are not going to be bringing any partners into the project, right? So that means that you don't have to complete an MOU, you can do an MOE. In every other situation, you're going to need an MOU. And we'll talk more about the MOU and the MOE later on when we get to that part. But just know that you will have to submit one or the other, because if you submit your application without it, you will lose, I think it's 15 points. And those are 15 points that you don't want to just lose those 15 points. So make sure that you are submitting one or the other depending on what's required of you. So this is talking about everything I just explained. So I had mentioned earlier that there are some caps in how much money you can give a partner organization if the partner organization is a mainstream victim services provider. And so this year, that compensation is limited to $30,000 for the 3-year award period. That means it's about $10,000 a year. This is an increase from last year's funding, which was $20,000. So they did bring this money up. And it's very clear that when you bring in a mainstream victim service provider, you need to be using the funds to pay for training and technical assistance to the lead agency on services for victims. So they're very clear on how these partners can come in and what they can be paid for or not be paid for. Now, something that I also think is really important to note that some people ask about is, do the partners have to be in the same area that I'm proposing to serve? And the answer is no. So the lead applicant, let me give you an example. So let's say that Miami-Dade County is your service area and you are the lead applicant. As the lead applicant, you must be located in Miami-Dade County, but the partners on the project can be anywhere else. So, with the Zoom and the virtual rooms and all that stuff, that means that opens the door to a lot of other things. It could open the door to telehealth. It could open the door to financial literacy courses that are via Zoom that are being facilitated by someone who's in Washington, D.C. or somewhere different than you. So your partners do not have to be in the same service area that you are, but you have to be in the service area that the population you are proposing to serve is. Questions on that? Okay. So I mentioned earlier the pre-application information sessions, and yes, they are March 14th and March 15th from 2 to 4. I would encourage you to email OVW to sign up for at least one of them. Don't go to both. They will cover the same thing in both, so you don't have to go to both. I also plan on attending, and I will ask Veronica, who's the program manager, whether there'll be a recording, and if there is a recording and they're willing to share, I will try to share with everybody in our listserv as well. So if you can make it, hopefully we could share it. Okay, so now we get into the actual writing of the grant. So I think the best advice I can give people when they write a grant is, like I said earlier, there is a formula to it. You need to follow all of the formatting and technical requirements. So this right here, these 8 steps are very important in whether you have a successful application or not. It sounds silly, but that's how the federal government wants to read its proposals. You need to follow this to the T. I have told organizations that we're working with this year that we're happy to take a look at your application and give you some high-level comments as to, oh, hey, remember, it needs to be double-spaced, or the margins are off, or make sure that you're typing in Times or Arial. We're happy to give that kind of feedback and help you any way we can before you submit your final application. Now, you will see that there is a very clear way in which OVW lays out what they want your project or your application to look like, right? They have a proposal narrative, they have a budget detail worksheet and narrative, the MOU or MOE, and then letters of commitment if it applies to the project that you are proposing. Each of these sections has a points allotment to it. So this is like a test, right? It's like a test. You're gonna turn in your term paper, and hopefully you have done everything that the teacher is asking for. And at the end, you'll be able to provide these amazing services and create these amazing projects in your community. So the more that you read this solicitation, which I know can be tedious, because trust me, it has been my life for an entire week and it's very tedious, but the more you make yourself familiar with it and with how they want you to actually present the information, the better chances you have of making sure that you are submitting a strong proposal. So I will go and scroll to where we begin your proposal. The first part is your proposal abstract. It's funny that this is the first part that they cover, because my advice to all potential grantees is this is the last thing you're going to write. Because this is a summary of your entire 20-page narrative. So I want you to know really what it is you're doing, how you're spending your money, what the project is going to look like before you can summarize it. So this summary is a 2-page summary. It's double-spaced. It's, it's nothing very fancy, and it's gonna probably have a lot of language from your program narrative. Then there are some forms that you will be filling out. The pre-award risk assessment is one of them, and we are also happy to go through these forms with you and see where you have gaps and whether we can help you in developing policies or procedures around any of these issues, because they want to see that you have the proper financial controls in place to handle federal money. So that's what this part is. So you'll have to answer all of these fun questions. And again, we're happy to go through that with you if you want to do a one-on-one, and we can discuss those. Then the summary data sheet is another thing that you're going to have to fill out. There will be a lot of filling out of forms. So you're going to have to get comfortable with answering a lot of different things that they're asking of you, but we are here to help you and support you in that process. Here, this number 2 is asking for a DUNS number. That's not something that we use anymore. So just make sure that you only add your unique entity identifier. Okay. And these are questions that are specific to CSSP funding that you'll also have to respond to when you're submitting the proposal. And then when you decide what category applicant you are, you will be writing that here. And now we get to the actual proposal narrative. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a way in which they outline this in this document. And my best piece of advice is grab this outline and follow it. So when you start writing your proposal narrative, for example, that can be your Roman numeral 1, proposal narrative, right? And then A can be purpose of proposal, right? You got 55 points in the proposal narrative. And it's important that you follow their outline format. They very clearly tell you here that they want you to answer these 4 questions when you talk about the purpose of the proposal. This means that your paragraphs should be structured in the same form that they're asking you these questions. So Roman numeral 1, program narrative, A, purpose of proposal, A1, communities in the service area. We are proposing to serve this community in this service area that looks this way. This many million people live in this county. This is their breakdown of racial ethnicity. This is why we need this kind of service, right? So you're going to be addressing each one of these individually. If you can highlight the section that you are referring to in your paragraph, that is very helpful for the person that is reviewing it. That means, right, when you're writing Roman numeral, I can't say that, Roman numeral 1, purpose, program narrative, for example, bold it, right? And when you're writing A, purpose of proposal, underline it. Right? Just do something to bring the reviewer's eye to the fact that you're answering the question that was posed. Because at the end, when the person that's reviewing this reads your project, right, they're looking at a rubric to make sure that you have responded to whatever questions a solicitation asks for, right? And that's how you're scored. So if you can make that process easy for that person, that's better for you. So again, be very clear, right? 1A1, however you want to structure it, but bring attention to the fact that you are addressing purpose of the proposal, that you're addressing what will be done. In the what will be done section, I will say, make sure that when you talk about the activities, number 1, they are activities that you have the capacity to complete with the project budget and staffing that you are proposing. Right? So sometimes we'll get organizations that put a part-time person or a 30-hour person in a project to do program management, to do advocacy, to do coordination, and to do all sorts of things. Well, that's actually 2 people. So is that sustainable, or do you have to increase your budget and think of hiring a full-time person and a part-time person? So make sure that your goals are smart, right? That they're specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and time bound. So when you're talking about the specific activities that you're going to do, be very clear about when you intend to do them. Like a good example is, in the first 3 months of the project, you're going to hire project staff. That's a reasonable amount of time. But is it, considering the way that the market is now? So think about all those things. Is it really going to take you 3 months to hire? Will it take you longer to hire? Take all those things into consideration when you write your activities. And remember that one thing I like to tell people is under promise and over deliver, right? So what does that look like? That looks like me knowing that I can very likely serve 20 people with what I'm proposing. I think that's totally reasonable, but I'm going to tell OVW I'm going to do 15. And when I do my report, they're going to see that I actually did 20. And look, that looks great. I spent the money and I served more people than I said I was going to serve. And that means that if it's time to reapply, that looks really good, right? So it means that you use the funding wisely, that you over delivered, right? As opposed to saying, we're going to serve 25 people and serving 15, right? So again, under promise, over deliver, but in a reasonable way. So I mentioned earlier, if you are addressing priority area 2, which is sexual assault, or priority area 3, which is LGBTQ underserved communities, you will have to answer other questions as part of your program narrative. So I would structure this, if you're putting this in your narrative, as like subsection, whatever, C, I think it is, or D. Depends where you are at, right? So just add a subsection and then call it exactly what they're calling it here. Additional information for applicants addressing priority area 2 or priority area 3. And so this is exactly what they want you to address here. And if you will be requiring an initial planning phase, so sometimes if you are completely new to this process, you may want to take 6 months to do a lot of planning on how this project is going to work. So you can do so here. And this is what you need to follow if you need an initial planning phase. Now, keep in mind, if your planning phase is like you need to hire staff and have meetings with some of the partners at the beginning, and it's like something like the first 3 months of the project, you won't need to do this. That would just be part of your what will be done section above when you write your timeline of activities. Questions so far? Okay. The next section is who will implement the proposal, and this is where you get to brag about you, your partners, and your program staff. Again, continue to follow their outline and identify the sections that you are responding to. Then it's the budget. And if you were with us on Tuesday, then I don't have to say a word about this piece. But what I will say is you need to make sure that your budget narrative and your program narrative talk to one another, that they're not disconnected. If your project is proposing to provide gift cards to participants so that they can, let's say Uber cards so that they can transport themselves to support groups, right? That cost of the Uber cards or the Uber cost needs to be reflected in your budget worksheet and in your budget narrative. So you need to make sure that whoever is writing your budget knows what's in your narrative, right? And vice versa. A best practice is to always have a program person and a financial person review the budget and budget narrative so that you can make sure that everything that you proposed in your narrative is actually accounted for in the financial piece. And a lot of times the program people have a better idea of like, yeah, no, that's not enough money to cover Uber transportation for participants for the year. We need to increase it, right? So take that feedback. Use the people that have the knowledge on these issues and let them give feedback on whether they think it's sustainable or not sustainable. So this again is telling us that it's a 36-month grant or a 3-year project, that it can be up to 450. This is everything I kind of just covered. So we'll go unallowable costs. So this is, you cannot use money from OVW to do lobbying, fundraising. You cannot purchase real property. You cannot do physical modifications to buildings or constructions. You can, however, pay rent. So that's important, right? You can't have a building that you're going to remodel. You can't buy a building, but you can use some of these funds to pay rent. So pre-award costs, we covered this actually earlier when I said that if they haven't given you an actual start date, don't start spending money on the project because you will likely not get that money back. And let's see. Okay, so if you're addressing priority area 1 or implementing purpose areas 1 or 3, you will need a letter of commitment. And that's going to depend on whether your project is working, is going to be proposing to work with the local government to enhance services to culturally specific populations, or if your project is proposing to strengthen criminal justice interventions, right? By providing training for law enforcement, court staff, and such. Here's what the letter of commitment needs to address. And if I am not mistaken, there's a sample. There's a sample that we can share with you. I can find it and you can get it in the email that you'll get after this. But there's a sample letter of commitment in the OVW website that you can use as a template. And then the MOU, MOE, always my favorite part. Like I said before, you have to submit one or the other. It is worth actually 20 points. You do not want to lose those 20 points. What I will say about the MOU is, you know, maybe you're an organization that can actually submit an MOE because you have the 3 years of experience and, you know, you don't need to partner with anyone. I would encourage you to think about that and to see who else in your community is doing work to help survivors, because OVW likes to see collaboration. And so it's encouraged to work with other service providers to enhance the services that survivors are getting, right, from their communities. And then the other thing I'll say for the MOU is, when you are reaching out to organizations to partner with you, always be very clear as to what is expected from them and what the compensation will look like. We have a handy document that Izzy is probably going to share or has shared already, called Transformational Collaborations, which talks about ways in which you can bring in partners for projects such as this one, in ways in which everything is accounted for on each end, and conversations are transparent, right? So this looks like your partner gets to read the narrative and gets to see the budget before they sign on to your MOU. Because in the end, the MOU needs to be signed by every partner you're bringing in. So something else I want to know is that if you are partnering with 5 different organizations, you still need one MOU. So it's one MOU that will clearly delineate what each organization is responsible for under this project. It is not 5 MOUs, it is only one. And so the last thing I'll say about the MOU is make sure that you have your partners have access to the narrative and the budget before they're needing to sign and before the deadline. Like we said earlier, like the deadline on this is April 18th. I apologize, my dog is barking if you can hear him. The deadline for this solicitation is April 18th. So if you are having partners that need to sign your MOUs, your personal deadline is 5 days before April 18th. Make it 10 days for your partners earlier to sign these MOUs, because the last thing you want is to be scrambling at the end because you don't have one signature in your MOU, and you can obtain electronic signatures. Stephanie, you're going to say something?
I was going to ask a question. So Native American Lifelines, we perform case management that includes domestic violence, but we do not have a domestic violence set aside program at the moment. Would we need an MOU or would we qualify for an MOE?
How long have you been operating?
As an organization, we've been operating since 2000.
I think you can do an MOE, but if you are partnering with someone, if you choose to partner with someone, then you have to do an MOU.
Okay, thank you. Because I previously myself, as the acting assistant director, I'm not working in domestic violence capacity, but that is my background as well.
Right. So then you should if you don't want to partner with anyone, you can do an MOE. But if you decide to partner with someone, you will absolutely need the MOU.
Absolutely. Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. And I think, I think that may be part of it right there that I had highlighted. So these are a bunch of other forms, administrative forms that you will need to complete as part of your application. They are not worth a single point, but if you don't complete them, they tell you that it may result in the application being removed from consideration. So that means make sure that when you're in grants.gov and you're in Just Grants, that you are completing all the administrative forms that are required to complete. I think that is the end. Let's see. So if you haven't already registered with SAM, I hate to say, but it may be too late. It says the timeline is 2 to 3 weeks, but I've been working with some organizations that actually applied for their SAM registration like in December and still don't have it for whatever reason. if your registration is not active, but you do have a login, please go in there and troubleshoot that. There is also nothing wrong with waiting until next year. And there's also nothing wrong with looking at other different OVW solicitations, right? So what I will say about waiting until next year is, you know, a lot of times people just want to apply now because now it's when it's available, but it's also nice to give yourself a year as an organization to build the capacity to be able to sustain the project that you are going to be pitching to OVW, right? And so that is something that we can also help you with. We can work with you for an entire year to make sure that you will be ready come next time, and that you are ready to hit the ground running when grant season begins again in 2024.
Gheisha?
Yep.
So Rachel is saying, I'm having trouble figuring out how to register in Just Grants. Is there a secret?
Yes, you need to finish the grants.gov stuff first.
Okay, and Stephanie says the SAM registration can be a headache. Yes, Stephanie, it can be.
Yes, it can be awful. So I would really encourage you to start that process now if you have not already. And again, we're here to support you with any issues that come up with SAM as well. Thank you, Izzy. Okay, so this is just telling you that, you know, even though they have a deadline, that they're encouraging you to do it at least 2 days prior. But that's not going to be a problem for any of you because you're going to actually do it a week early. So we're good, right? And then this is something that I found very important because we did work with some folks last year that had issues with Just Grants, because you can't, like, if you have a Mac or you're using Safari, it's not going to work. My recommendation would be, if you have a Mac, try to download the Google Chrome browser and do all of your grant application in Just Grants and grants.gov through the Chrome browser, because it doesn't support anything else very well. And Daniel, you have your hand raised.
Hi, sorry, just a quick question, and I'm sorry if this comes across a little bit not so informed. But
Okay.
I'm under the impression this is a grant that's using like federal funds, right? But is this and administered by Caminar Latino? But I was wondering if it follows the traditional process of a federal grant as far as applying and reporting.
Yes, so yes, let me clarify. So this is a grant that is by the Office of Violence Against Women. Caminar Latino is just the training and technical assistance provider for culturally specific organizations that have never applied. So we're here to help you navigate the process of applying for a federal grant for the first time. Yes, so the answer to your question is yes, it would be the normal federal grant application process where you need a SAM ID, a UEI, a grants.gov login, and a Just Grants login.
Okay, and same for reporting and follow-up, everything follows the same process.
That's correct. So it would be, I think this one is a semi-annual report. And if you are awarded, you would probably be going to a training in Washington, DC, to learn about data gathering and reporting and financial reporting on the grant.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that information.
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Rachel wants to know, how does OVW distribute funds once awarded, reimbursement or otherwise?
You can draw down funds, so it is not reimbursement. It is not like VOCA. Like in VOCA, you have to spend the money and then you have to prove that you spent it, and then they reimburse you when you give them all the receipts and everything. Here is you can draw down the money and then spend it. Okay. So technical difficulties, this is where you would go. If you have tech difficulties, remember to make a note. I advise people to keep a spreadsheet of some sort, because trust me, you will be calling them. That says when you called, who you spoke to, the ticket number, and what happened and when it happened, right? And then I think So peer review, we kind of talked about that. There will be people that are going to be reviewing your application that will have some sort of rubric to make sure that you answered all the questions that were required to be answered. If you've had federal grants before, they do what's called a past performance review. So if you've had federal grants before and maybe you didn't spend all the money or there were some sort of findings in an audit, that is something that may come up and they may ask you questions about. And again, they anticipate that they will do this funding October 1st of 2023. And the very last thing in here is a checklist of everything that needs to be completed. It's a good start of a checklist to keep you kind of on track, making sure that you do the things that you need to do. But I'll say there are things that are not here, starting with SAM, right? Grants.gov, just grants, UEIs, none of that is here. So you can use this, but keep in mind that there are other things that we discussed that also need to be completed before you have a full application. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open it for questions. We have about 20 minutes. Erica.
Thank you so much, card speaker, so you can hear me. I feel really excited and more confident after the budget meeting and then today's meeting. But when you were talking about the MOU and MOE, I understand what each one is just from prior knowledge. But my brain started swirling about one particular event that I would like to have that mimics something that I was able to do without funding with the Detroit Police Department. So right before the pandemic, we were able to host a Partnership to Peace brunch with the Detroit Police Department's DV unit, and they wrapped a car for us, purple, specifically for domestic violence. And they've been doing it every year since. But all of that was 100% their funding. They just asked me to come in as an advisor or a partner, and we weren't compensated. But now that we're trying to expand with this grant into the LGBTQ community in here in Detroit, my brain was swirling like, why can't we partner with the LGBTQ task force for DPD and ask them to wrap a car for Pride and do the same type of brunch? Well, I need them to do a MOE or MOU, or do I need to do anything at all if I ask them to participate with us?
If you're not asking them, if you're not giving them money, that's the best way to say it. If you're not giving them money or bringing them in as a partner on the project, right? They don't need to be part of the MOU, right? If they're just someone that a community organization that you're working with for something, you can say that you're doing that in your narrative, but you don't have to compensate them because it's just an activity, right? So your activity is the actual event. And the budget piece for that is whatever staff time is spent on that event. But if they're not coming in as that they're going to be, I don't know, doing some training or something like that, that you're going to pay them for, you don't have to put them in an MOU.
No, they wouldn't. They would just bring the car. I would try to convince them to wrap a car. Which I think I'll probably be able to do. I think they're going to be excited about that. But so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't need to do an MOU or MOE.
No, I mean, you can do, based on what I know about you, you can do an MOE, but if you decide to partner with anyone else that you're going to pay, then you need an MOU.
Right. And that would be Serena.
Probably, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or clarifications?
So I think we're going to need some help with our pre-award risk assessment.
Okay.
So should we just send you an email with, okay.
Yes, so actually, I meant to say this before I closed the application, but during the month of March, I'm going to be hosting what we're calling office hours, and they're going to happen every Thursday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. And what's going to happen is we're gonna send you all an email after this presentation ends, that's gonna have a link. So you're able to drop into those office hours anytime between 2 and 4, and just come with anything that have come up for you during that week that you want clarification for. Because it's not by appointment. There may be a day where you're the only one there, but there may be a day where there's 3 or 4 people there, right? And what I would say to that is it's good also because you'll benefit from whatever questions other people are asking. Because it may be something that comes up for you later on. Or maybe you have the answer to the question. That way we all learn from each other.
Great. Thank you.
And Arely, yes, absolutely. So I am fully bilingual and we can do everything in Spanish. Yes.
Thank you. Gracias.
Yes. Does anyone else have any other questions? No? All right. Well, like I said, you will get an email in a few days with the recording and the PDF that I just want. I know it's grueling, it's super long, you know, but we have to do this because if we don't understand what they're asking, it's hard to put a good proposal, strong proposal together. So you'll get that email in a couple of days, and probably today or tomorrow, you'll get the email with the office hours information. And then, like I said, you could just drop in anytime between 2 and 4 Eastern. It's great to meet you all. Thank you for being here.